And good evening to everybody, and welcome to this 10th edition of the Maternity and Midwifery Hour. You're very welcome. My name's Sue Macdonald, and I'm the very happy curator of the Maternity and Midwifery Hour and the Maternity and Midwifery Festivals. And it's my delight to be chairing this evening's session. I've got two wonderful midwives, and I'm really excited about this evening and very happy because I know it's going to be pure, unadulterated midwifery. But before we get on to that, I'm going to put both of my guests on the spot, as we always do, and ask them for a moment of the week to share with you all. And I shall start with Jo. So could you share a moment, Jo?
I can, thank you. So it could be the same moment as Lesley, I'm not quite sure, but on Saturday, I had the huge pleasure of spending the most wonderful day with all for midwifery and the practicing midwives. So we were recording TED Talks, and Lesley was there, and Sue Dow, and lots of the wonderful, wonderful midwifery leaders. So it was just an honour and a pleasure, and yeah, a really high point in the weekend and my career.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jo. That's lovely. And Lesley?
Well, I'm going to say the same thing. I've wanted to meet Jo for ages. I listened to you talking on this hour a while ago and read your blog and kept reading your social media and thinking, I have to meet Jo. So we met on Saturday. It was TED Talks by legacy leaders. So I was quite nervous in the beginning because we had all of our instructions and you can't go above 18 minutes and you don't have notes to go by. But the day was wonderful because we all watched each other and gave feedback and got to know each other, and we were fed well. And so I left the day feeling really uplifted. The other thing is, it was my son's 50th birthday, and he lives way up in the north of Canada in Dawson City in the Yukon. And I kept thinking about him, and we all got together and sang happy birthday to you, dear Ian. And we sent it to him by WhatsApp. He really loved it. And he was asking all about where we were. So that kind of brought me close to my son, who's now a half a century, 50 years old.
You must have been a child bride, Lesley. Definitely. Thank you for that. Now, Lesley is allowed. She's sneaked in an extra moment of the week, but she's allowed on this occasion. So we should come back to our lovely guests, and I should have properly introduced them. I will properly introduce, but we have Lesley Page and we have Jo Crawford, and I should have said that right at the start, and I do apologise to both of my lovely guests, but we'll get there later as well. Now, just another welcome, and really just to kind of, it's quite a special day today because it's actually 2 years since the first lockdown, and it's almost 2 years to the day that we started the Maternity and Midwifery Hour, because we wanted to connect midwives, maternity care assistants, student midwives, women and families, and anyone in maternity services to really get that connection, but also to provide information to midwives and student midwives in a nice digestible format. And now I've just got to switch off something. It's squeaking at me. That's it, sorry. And it's squeaking at you too, sorry about that. So this was born, and it's still going. We kind of thought it was going to go in a short way, but of course the pandemic has continued and it's still with us, sadly, and people are still poorly with it. So we've carried on because it's a very nice way of keeping up to date. And if you're someone who's doing an assignment or a project for work, the Matflix look after all of the recordings that you will get, and it's all accessible, and you can update yourself so well and so enjoyably. So just to remind you, you can do that from Matflix, all free, and you can share. And we're very happy for you to share the presentations that we have here. Now, we'll just do our usual big thank you to our NHS colleagues, especially in the maternity services, because as I said a moment or two ago, still COVID is around, still people are poorly with it. Not necessarily as poorly as they were, but some are, and some have the long COVID, which is dragging people down quite a lot. And so we say a big thank you to people who are keeping things going, keeping the standards of care at such a high level to women and babies and looking after their colleagues. So big thank you there. And that, I mean, that's covering sickness and everything. And things are difficult and people are tired and stressed. So we'll say, look after yourselves, just as you're looking after women and babies and families so well. Now, I'm just moving on to news swiftly. I'm very conscious of the time and I don't want to take any time from Lesley and Joe that I don't have to take, but I'm just saying that about the spring statement that's in the news, a bit of a relief with 5p off a litre of petrol, starting, I think, tomorrow, and the household support fund for energy bills. I have put some information on our resources sheet, which includes Martin Lewis's little overview of the statement for those of you who don't want the whole statement in all, they just want to know the key facts. So that's on your resources sheet. And of course, I have the usual March happiness, Action for Happiness. This is courtesy of Action for Happiness. These are really good. It's a good way of giving yourself one little task a day just to do to keep yourself centered. And today it's tune into your feelings without judging or trying to change them. Very much mindfulness there. Now, as for days, and I always like to find us of International Day or International Week, it's International Meteorological Day. I'm not sure how we celebrate that, but I think knowing about the stars and the moon is quite good. And Friday is the International Day of Victims of Slavery and Transatlantic Slave Trade. So I think that's something that we need to think about. I know it's quite a lot in the news at the moment with people having international visits. It's also, you'll like this one, it's International Bed Month. So it's good to remind us all to get sufficient rest. And it's also National Nutrition Month. So you need to eat well and rest well. And I think that's very good as we're moving into the spring. And it's also, of course, International or National Day of Reflection to remember the people we've lost. And I know the Macmillan nurses and do promote that quite strongly. And it's very important to remember people we have lost and kind of give ourselves that time to think. And we know that at the moment, the news is very full of the Ukrainian invasion, and it's a terrible time for them. And we send them also love and respect for what they're going through. And we hope to see more Ukrainian refugees coming in and being cared for and being supported by us here. Hopefully that will happen. And also obviously pray for peace, because nobody wants to be away from their own country. They want to be at home with their loved ones and with their place. So we hope they'll get there. The other thing I want to highlight is the Windrush Nurses and Midwives Leadership Programme from the Florence Nightingale Foundation. That's also on the resources list, and it might be something you'd be interested in applying for. The programme looks fabulous, looks really, really good, and it's well worth applying if you fit the criteria. Have a look at the website when you can. Okay, well, I'm moving fast. I feel as though I'm really gibbling and gabbling, but I don't want to miss a bit. And you'll have come along for this flight this evening, and we're looking at continuity of care, and we're looking from a kind of head of service and a kind of strategic viewpoint and a reflection, looking all the way through the service, what helps and what doesn't help. I'm kind of the flight attendant here because I've got two wonderful pilots this evening who are going to be presenting to you. So firstly, I'm delighted to introduce Joanne Crawford. She's a Lincolnshire lass, can't even say the place, who moved to the north of England to study midwifery at the University of Newcastle, worked clinically at North Tyneside and the Queen Elizabeth at Gateshead, combining the roles of labour ward coordinator and practice development midwife. So she's a midwife's midwife, is Jo. She's had a role in the Trust Clinical Governance team, and she headed up work in the deteriorating patient, leading on the introduction of the early warning SBAR score that you'll all know about, the communication tool, and morbidity and mortality reviews, and realizing that her heart and future career lay in midwifery and maternity services. Hurrah! She returned to midwifery as a maternity matron and coordinating at the site as the duty matron. She obviously likes to sort of juggle a lot in her life, does Jo. But she highlights that maternity services have a huge generational opportunity for transformation change to improve outcomes of women and job satisfaction for midwives. And she's passionate about this and making sure that the leadership of midwives allows us to achieve this for our daughters, sisters and their families. And she's a head of midwifery at the moment. And she says it's a wonderful privilege to represent and lead her profession and the maternity service. So welcome, Jo. Thank you so much for being with us. The screen is now yours.
Thank you, Sue. Okay, does that look okay, Sue, there? Okay, thank you very much. So a few weeks ago, I was asked to write a blog about the journey that we've taken so far in the unit I work in the northeast of England. We are on a journey to full continuity. And the reference to the plane and taking off was just kind of I do a lot of things when I take the dog out for a walk, and that's really where my ideas kind of come together. And I really felt it was very much around this journey and around very much thinking about where we've been on for a number of years. We've spent lots of time thinking about or hearing our colleagues say that the staffing isn't safe, that it's really concerning, that it's a real challenge daily on the delivery suite, and in the community they've got huge caseloads and the community midwives can't deliver the care they would really love to do. And the opportunity in 2016 absolutely was presented to us in the latest form, and I'm sure Lesley will come to some of the historic opportunities and aims to move towards where we're aiming to now around delivering continuity of carer. And the research is all there. I'm not going to talk about all of that today, and I think many of you are familiar with all of that, and how we can massively impact the outcomes of mums and babies and their families. It's the one time that we can absolutely have a generational impact on the outcomes of mums and babies, particularly from a public health point of view, and particularly from a mental health point of view. Very much around the relationship, the belonging, and very much that love and the kindness that comes with the continuity of care. But equally, my passion for improving job satisfaction in midwifery is absolutely foremounted in everything that I'm trying to do, but it's not easy. And I think what I've talked about a lot in things previously is very much around it's scary and it's hard, and it's moving to a place that midwives have never been to before. And actually we're destabilising and changing how midwives work on a daily basis. Midwives have been very in this country over the last 10 to 15 years, we've become to an extent institutionalised, where we attend a delivery suite, where we provide a shift and we go home. And from a community point of view, we're working to between 96 and 150 in some instances caseloads of women per midwife, and it's just not sustainable. So that's a little bit of background to sort of the journey where we're heading to. And really contemplating what I wanted to share today and what might be helpful for people that are maybe watching today was actually thinking about some of the top 10 tips on our journey so far that might help teams out there who may be clinical midwives, maybe student midwives thinking about the future and the career that they're moving into. It might be heads of midwifery that are helping to steer this journey. And I think what's really important is to understand that we're not there yet. This isn't a story of success. It's a story of a journey. And to say that it's a success would be too confident. And certainly, that's not where we are yet. But we are sharing where the journey has taken us to date. So, in the form of the top 10 tips. Number one, I think, is about belief, and it's about the commitment to change. And I think if we can't develop that commitment and truly believe this is where we need to go to for our families and for our staff, then I think that belief is really hard, and it comes bi-directional. So if the head of midwifery doesn't believe this is the right thing to do, it's really hard for the board and the staff and the team working in the unit to move things forward. But similarly, the other way around, if the non-execs, the board, the service lead, the chief executive are not of the opinion that this is the right thing to do either, then it's really hard for a service, no matter how much you believe, to move things forward. So I think it's that understanding of what the background is and what the commitment is to driving this journey that's essential. Number 2 is leading with a sense of purpose. So really considering the aim and what we want to achieve here. I think one of the things that we've learned over the last 2 years is that one team will not impact the full transformation. Having one team will impact 280 women on average when we look at the methodology around continuity of care. We have approximately 5,000 women in the service I work in, and we want to influence every one of those women. Every one of those women deserves that level of care, regardless of background, regardless of ethnicity. We know, however, that deprivation, ethnicity absolutely plays a part in some of the outcomes that we see on a daily basis. And for that purpose, we've started our journey based on, in our area, deprivation. But actually, in order to have full impact on outcomes, but also full impact on the workforce in the acute care and how it can really improve the workforce and the stability and the safety in the acute care, then full transformation is the answer, because that's where you're going to get the midwives who are caring for the women in the community, following those women in, and we start to staff the unit for the women that are attending the unit rather than a roster which has a ceiling amount of midwives that are available. Number 3 is around consider your workforce carefully. The most wonderful guidance came out just on the right day last year in October 2021 from NHS England. And that gave us a guide to be able to implement continuity of care. And I think on reflection, it's something that was absolutely necessary and maybe would have been great coming a little bit earlier down that journey, but was fantastic. And within that, the national team talked very much around the building blocks that we need to be able to deliver this model. And one of those building blocks is staffing. And it's very clear within that guidance that being birth rate plus compliant is an absolutely essential before we move forward on this, and something that we need from a safety point of view. So if we're birth rate plus compliant and we have that funded establishment, the challenge back would be, and not in a safety, not compromising safety in any stretch of the imagination, but it's really considering, are we hiding behind some of those bricks? We will always have vacancies, and if we rewound 2 years ago, we would have had vacancies then. And if we stick to the traditional model, we will have vacancies going forward. Acknowledging that some people are a bit scared and we are losing some staff to different units across the patch as we start to move forward in this model, but there are vacancies there. So it's about monitoring those vacancies and trying to fill those vacancies as well as still moving forward. Because if we wait for vacancies to be filled in 100%, then we will be here for a while and movement won't happen. And it's taking that balanced approach between knowing that the end point is the great place we need to be, and we need to take that slow, safe approach that's assured we're around safe staffing numbers to get to that place, to get to the end result. Number 4 is the NHS Workforce Tool. And people have maybe heard me say this before, but I was so in the right place at the right time, and a little bit cheeky when I contacted Trixie, who's our national lead, and said to Trixie, I don't get this. I was on the naughty step. I wasn't delivering continuity of care in the northeast of England. The regional chief nurse had got in touch and said, now, Joanne, you are not performing well in this, and we really need to look at how you're going to manage to improve on this. And so in a darkened room one night, I tweeted Trixie, who said, have you got a couple of hours on Teams? And she walked through the Workforce Tool. Now, I was just hugely fortunate and very thankful that I had the opportunity. But the Workforce Tool works. People consider what we need lots and lots and lots of more midwives to be able to deliver this, and the answer is no, we don't. If we work through the Workforce Tool, when you're birth rate plus compliant from a budgeted establishment point of view, this is possible. Number 5 is work collaboratively with commissioners and local authority. The health inequalities that we see today in women and families is not all of our responsibility. And we do know as midwives, we think we can change the world, and actually we're going to take responsibility for all of it and fix everything. But interestingly, and it is quite interesting actually, we've had our day 1 of our UNICEF assessment today at the trust I work at, and actually on reflection, thinking about how many years we've tried to improve breastfeeding rates and how many years we've tried to decrease the women that are smoking, and just 2 of the metrics during pregnancy. And as a head of midwifery, really thinking, what am I going to say this month about trying to improve those inequalities? But this will make a difference. We've already seen in some of our areas of deprivation where it can significantly decrease smoking. So if we can bring smoking down for those 280 women, if we can then do that for 5,000 women, and then look at our, the LMS and filter that through the rest of the country, what difference long term will that have on health outcomes for our next generation? So it's not just our responsibility as midwives, but that of the commissioners and the local authority to engage in this transformation and help us. So based on that comes the cheekiness. So squatters' rights in family centres is a thing of the future. So taking on board the fallout of COVID and what opportunities we've had to be able to work alongside commissioners and local authority to look at things like what estate is free, and actually how can you help us in moving forward in this journey together to really significantly impact our local families. Oh, and by the way, it's in the NHS contract, so please give us a hand. Number 6 is consider a roadmap. So one of the things that we've learned over the last 2 years is that a strategy, something that arrives in a paper that lands in somebody's inbox or may well come in a PDF on a WhatsApp, is not going to create buy-in. People need to know what's going to happen to me next week or next month, and where will I be within this journey. We need to set ahead a roadmap that really thinks about where we aim to be, by when, and who will it'll involve, and to engage staff, users, and the organisation within that. And I think very much as well, it's about considering on that journey that we maintain the rules of continuity, and we talk about these golden threads. And the golden threads are the headcount, the skill mix, the caseload. If we have too many people or too few people in that team, we're not going to be able to provide birth availability or acute availability. If the skill mix isn't right and we have all acute midwives versus community, historic community and acute midwives, and actually that ability to share those skills and knowledge will not develop as we move through. And we need to very much think about escalation. And I know that's something that personally within our unit has been a real topic of conversation over the winter, when Omicron hit, and on the 7th of January, I'll never forget, we had 30 whole-time equivalents that were all isolating and wondered how we're going to get through to Monday. So I think actually it's about considering that continuity works because of the research and because of the ratios and because of the headcount. And by having the ratios that we do, that gives the midwives the opportunity to deliver the women, care for them antenatally, care for them postnatally, and create the outcomes. By filling in gaps in the acute unit, whilst what we need to do is maintain safety at that very point in time, is not the long-term answer, and that will create burnout, and that's what we are moving away from, and we will not commit to, but with continuity of care. So how we escalate within our unit is so important. And consider consultation. So at the very beginning of this, when we set our first strategy, which doesn't look anything like our strategy now, I would say, as we started meeting with staff side and with some of our colleges and our staff as we moved towards the strategy, the most wonderful HR manager I work with said, Joanne, I think you really need to consider consultation. It's what the unions were asking for and what staff side were asking for, and it scared me a little bit. But actually, it is the best thing that we've done. And I would really, whilst it was very, very hard, and it was a long process of a number of months, having lots and lots of one-to-ones with staff, really listening to staff and hearing how concerned staff were, and thinking about how this was going to affect staff on an individual basis. It was absolutely it was absolutely a task well worth doing. What we did was consider the standards for the NMC standards for midwifery practice. Now, if we reflect on that, domain 2 is around safe and effective midwifery care and promoting continuity of care and carer at every juncture of our profession. So it's reflecting on actually that's something that as midwives we should all be delivering. It's also considering the things for our midwives and been advocates for our midwives in ensuring their pay is protected in such a huge change, and ensuring there is a reasonable change of notice of change for rotation and the things that will affect them in their daily life. So actually the consultation was really, really a great thing to do, although probably the hardest thing I've done in my career. The other side of it was, which was slightly funny, was that when we started looking at some people's job descriptions, they were based on health authorities that didn't even exist in some of the hospitals that had been knocked down. So it was probably a very good job to do. Number 8 was, how do we pick the team? So during our consultation, the question that I would say that was posed the most was, how are you going to put people in different teams? What are you going to do? And at one point on a night where I was feeling quite sort of stressed by it all, with the continuity of care midwife Amy, who I think may well be in our audience tonight, so if there's any technical knowledge required, she can come on through the chat, I think, and support within that. I think Amy and I at one point thought we would be standing in evening gowns with a lottery ball spinner, thinking this is and in team 3 we will be having midwife number 204. But that that is really a real challenge to think, well, how do we do that? And I think the advice I would give moving forward is, it's not just about picking a number out of a hat and putting somebody in a team. And after being on one of our national leadership events that was supporting us as heads of midwifery through COVID, that Jackie Dunkley-Bent had put on, there was a wonderful lady on there who talked through about leadership in the pandemic, and she talked about choice and influence. And actually one of the things, control and influence, and one of the things I realised that we weren't doing was giving our staff the influence to be able to be involved in the allocation of teams. What we were doing was very much controlling everything about this strategy, up to the point we'd be controlling where they were working. So what we did was we went out to the staff and said, if you had a choice of which team you would like to work in, considering does it want to be near where you live, consider your children's schools, and do you want to be potentially doing safeguarding around, sort of the friends that your children go to school with. Think of all of these things and provide some choices, and that's what happened. And then by the powers of a big Excel sheet, we started to create a plan, and this became our tracker. And it's the most wonderful thing, but it's a thing that gives me the most headaches on a daily basis. And actually, if you printed it out now, it's now 5'6" high by 5 foot wide. So never print it out is the answer. We did one day, and I have put one of my daughters next to it, and yes, it was 5'6". But I think the other things to consider on more of a serious note is actually give people choice and bring them into that. But then, as we've moved through this journey, what we've realised is that there are other elements that you absolutely need to consider. And I think with every team that goes out, we learn more all of the time. So we need to think about location of where people live. We need to think about the team numbers and ensure that works. The whole time equivalent is really important. And what we've learned is that anything less than 0.64 whole time equivalent isn't going to work. And actually having 2 6.4 whole time equivalents within a team, you really need to consider that with regard to birth availability. Which is the delivering unit that the ladies will be delivering in. So we've got 2 acute units, and one of the things that we didn't get particularly right in the first sort of in phase 2 of our transformation was that some of our teams straddled both acute units. And what we found from that is that the midwives working in those teams didn't know if they were delivering babies in Unit A or Unit B. And actually those units are 34 miles apart. So it created a huge travelling pressure onto those midwives, and also which unit they attended. So we've moved forward from that now. And what we're going to be doing is having women from team, who we're going to allocate women to the teams with regard where they're planning to have their babies rather than their GPs. So that's something that we learned very quickly over the last few weeks. Skills and training and the preceptorship. Have we got preceptors in each one of the teams? And what we've created something called a skills passport, so that people have got strong skills in all different areas in that team to offset each other. Have we got safeguarding experience in the team, the hospital community ratio I mentioned, and where people live? So that was quite a long number 8. And number 9 was the confidence in numbers. So that is actually 1 month on a tracker, and all the blocks of colour are where names have been removed for obvious confidentiality, and it's just a kind of screenshot of another PowerPoint. What we did was we created a tracker which across the top was all of the continuity teams, and then underneath you can see the green on the left. That starts off with all the staff who in the establishment at one of our acute sites. The purple, the next row in, is the staff at the next acute site, and then the community teams below it. So on 1 month's time, you can see, which is why it's 5'6" high, where all of the midwives are on every month. And that was great, and that's what we thought we needed to be able to manage this behind the scenes, but we were wrong, because actually that's what the staff needed to see on a very, very detailed basis in order to buy in with the safety. So what we ended up with, I walked around several of the teams with a trolley dolly case, bringing back in the aeroplane, full of these big sheets to say, on junction 2 of the phase 3 of the tracker, on month May, we will have this number of midwives in acute unit 1. This is what we will require. That will require a 84% roster fill. In unit 2, we'll have a 90% roster fill. And in our community teams, we'll have 1 to 96. And in the Infinity teams, we'll be delivering 90% birth availability. They're just examples, but they're the kind of metrics that we're measuring against every month at every juncture of this rollout. And to give an example of where we are today, yesterday was our meeting with our execs. We do it once a month. We talk about where we are at every part of that juncture, from an acute unit on both sites, from traditional units that are left, and from the Infinity teams, which is our continuity out there. And because of a slight increase in our vacancies, we're going to pause our journey at junction 2 just for till we get some of those vacancies filled, because that's the right thing to do to keep our services safe. And as soon as those vacancies start to fill, we'll move to the next part of our roadmap. And that's what we've said we will do every month with our executives, including our non-exec and our chief exec, in order to give that assurance to our staff, but also to our board. And I think that's really, really important. And with that, hopefully will come the trust that what we're doing is safe as we move through all of this. Number 10 is communication. On this one, I will say sorry, because it's really hard. And I think communication, if we look at any of our RCAs, our incidents, it can be, again, a thread through many things. And when we look at Swiss cheese, it goes through every hole. So communication is really, really hard. We've got 262 midwives, slightly less our vacancies that are in it, but we have got 262 midwives in our establishment. We've got 25 consultants, we've got a big team of specialist midwives, we've got lots and lots of users, and we have got an executive team, the chief executives, that are very bought into this and need to have bi-directional communication as well. Through our consultation, we did over 240 one-to-ones at that point in time, and they continue. We did team sessions twice a week. I have been known to do a Teams session on a Sunday lunchtime with a midwife's husband who wanted to know about how she was going to manage her children, moving towards continuity. So as my partner was making the Yorkshire puddings, we did a Teams and talked about it with the family. But that's what, that isn't exemplar. That's actually, we need to do that, but it takes time, it takes energy, and it's the same questions that come up time and time again, but it's important to every one of those midwives. And we didn't get it right every time. There were still people felt that they weren't listened to. We had WhatsApp, because what we found was if you send a WhatsApp message out, you can hit about 30 or 40 people within about 2 minutes. Emails followed that. We had working group sessions looking at the numbers. We now have operational board meetings, project board meetings, board engagement and board assurance, and we're trying to create transparency. We will continue to get it wrong as much as I try to get it right, you know, that's I think is one of the biggest challenges. So here's the freebie. As anyone who knows me, I was never going to stop at number 10. I was always going to go for the little extra bit. So the freebie is don't be afraid to change. And I've coined a new phrase, and I've Googled it and I can't find it anywhere. So maybe it might be our new phrase that we can start to use. But reflect to perfect. So people have said to me during this consultation, you're changing what we're doing all the time. You're moving how the teams are formed. You're moving staff out of different teams, and that's often due to the one-to-ones. But actually, we need to reflect to perfect. We don't get it right in the first instance all the time. I'm sure the COVID vaccine wasn't made in the first attempt. It's okay to develop and improve. We can say sorry for it, and I coined the phrase sorry not sorry in a meeting once, because I was saying sorry for changing things, and I thought no I'm not sorry, actually it's the right thing to do, of which people thought was really funny. Be objective, listen to the team, stand by your belief. Some days when I remember one day when I came back from annual leave, I was talking to Lesley about it last week. I came back from annual leave and we had lots and lots of concern, and I remember the matron saying, Jo, are we doing the right thing? And I remember the staff saying, we're worried about the staffing and how this is going to work. And the chief executive said, hey, we're doing the right thing. This is fine, isn't it, Joanne? And I turned to Tracy Cooper, who was our regional chief midwife, and Trixie, while I was on Bluetooth coming down the A1 between the units, and said, I need some support. We are doing the right thing. And they'd all looked at the plans within minutiae detail, and they said, yes, we are. So share your belief, continue. If you can close your eyes at night with integrity and continue to believe, then we will make this happen. We will take our service, our women and our professionals, to the next part of our generational change, and we will make a difference. So keep the belief, and we will get there. So the final thought, sorry, everyone's scared of change. We are all scared of change. Even me, I get scared of change too, but be kind to each other, try and be objective, open your mind to what it could be like, get involved, because if you are involved in it, it takes away that control and you can start to influence what's happening. Reach out for support that day when I rang Tracy on the A1, and share your experiences, because actually we're all going through the same thing.
Fabulous. Now, have you got any extras?
Oh, yes, as always.
I think you have. There's an extra commit. Okay.
That's it.
Thank you so much, Jo. That was lovely and really very thought-provoking. And I know there's some little questions coming in. If you have questions, put them in, and we'll have time at the end of the program for those questions to come. But we're going to move swiftly on with all those 10 key points in mind. And I'm delighted to introduce Professor Lesley Page, who's known to everybody in the whole world, I'm sure. CBE, PhD, MSc, BA, honorary fellow at the Royal College of Midwives, honorary PhD midwifery. She's very well known for her work in humanising childbirth, supporting pregnancy and birth and the early weeks of life as transformational, critical to our future. She served as our RCM president from 2012 to 2017, and she's considerable international experience, as many of you will know, and has worked in lectured all over the world. And she was the first professor of midwifery in the UK at Thames Valley University in Queen Charlotte's. She's visiting professor now at Florence Nightingale School of Nursing Midwifery at King's College, and in adjunct professor at the University of Technology in Sydney and Griffith University in Australia. And she received the International Alumni Award at University of Technology Sydney in 2013 and conferred with an honorary DSc by University of West London in November 2013. And in 2014, she was made a Commander of the British Empire, that's the CBE for services to midwifery, and received an honorary PhD in midwifery from the University of Iceland. So she truly is not just our professor, but also the world's professor. So welcome to this evening, Lesley. The screen is now yours.
Thank you. Well, Sue, thank you very much. And Joe, that was absolutely fabulous. And despite all of those awards, I still get very nervous about my screen sharing, and I'm so relieved it's worked. Joe, I was noticing that last slide, that plane sure was having a steep takeoff. But anyway, what I wanted to say basically is that we've been cleared for takeoff. But what we need to make sure is that actually we don't abort and we don't have to land again. And we're in quite a critical period just now because we're still in COVID, and Chris Whitty says we're going to be living with it for the rest of our lives, well, his generation and mine anyway. And, you know, the world is very unsettled with what's happening in Ukraine, and midwives are feeling tired. And at this critical point, it seems to me that it's really important that we move forward with the kind of wonderful policy that we've got in the United Kingdom, but also that we recognize that there is not the option to stay the same. Basically, people will say, you know, we should just leave things as they are. We should just make a few changes and leave the transformational change, the fundamental change till later. But what scares me more than the change is staying the same, because I can see that the services aren't sustainable as they are. And Joe, what struck me about your presentation was that you both took this very, very broad view that this is generational, that we will impact on generations of people. But you also talked about this being about relationship and love and belonging. And if you think about birth, that is what birth is about. Your top 10 tips were wonderful. I went through them earlier and I ticked every one of them. And you talked about us being on a journey. And I think that that's really important to recognize that we're on a journey. And you also talked very much about planning. And the planning that you talked about was extremely, extremely detailed. And I think that that combination of having a big picture and doing the planning is really important. So I just want to take us back quite a long time till 1991. And this idea of us needing transformation of the maternity services, fundamental change of every part of the service, of the culture, of the systems, of the structure, and so on, was born. And this is called the Winterton Report. It was House of Commons Select Committee on the Maternity Services. Nicholas Winterton chaired it. And the story at that time was that Nicholas Winterton had kind of taken this on a bit lightly. But then as they started to make visits and talk to women and their families, he started to understand just how important, just how fundamental it was. And it was inspired really, this House of Commons Select Committee inquiry into the maternity services by Audrey Wise, the late Audrey Wise, who was a wonderful Labour MP. And her daughter-in-law had been receiving maternity care. And she made the case that although we seemed to have safe outcomes, there was much unhappiness. And the phrase was that all was not well with the maternity services. But what I really love about this pale blue book, it's a wonderful read, is it starts with the sentence, "What happens in pregnancy, birth, and the early weeks of life is of the utmost importance to all of us." And with that sentence, we get the idea that birth doesn't belong to professionals. It doesn't belong to the health services. Birth belongs to each and every one of us, and we must all take an interest in it. It will, in fact, affect our future. Now, I gave evidence with the Royal College of Midwives to this hearing, and it was a wonderful event because the books Effective Care in Pregnancy and Childbirth had just been published, and so we had all of the evidence at our fingertips, and we were prepared very, very well, and we gave very evidence-based responses to questions. And continuity of carer came up in a number of places as being fundamental to the change that people wanted to see. Caroline Flint was a midwife advisor to that committee. And in fact, we already had quite a bit of knowledge about team midwifery, or group practice, as I called it, or one-to-one midwifery, which I've been involved in setting up in Queen Charlotte's and Hammersmith Hospital. So we had quite a bit of knowledge. And when I went back through this book, I thought, actually, we knew quite a lot then, but we've got much more evidence now. Then the response to this was changing childbirth. And this really was a fundamental change. You see the bright orange book. Now, this reads beautifully. I was the midwife on the expert maternity group. It was chaired by Baroness Cumberledge, who continues to lead some of the most progressive change in maternity services in the world. And things were simpler at that time, and it reads more simply. And there were 3 principles of good maternity care. The woman must be the focus of maternity care. She should be able to feel that she is in control of what's happening to her and able to make decisions about her care based on her needs, having discussed matters fully with the professionals involved. Maternity services must be readily and easily accessible to all. They should be sensitive to the needs of the local population and based primarily in the community. Women should be involved in the monitoring and planning of maternity services to ensure that they are responsive to the models for changing society. In addition, care should be effective and resources used efficiently. Now, it's hard to remember that that term effective care was a very, very new one at that time, but it was fundamentally important to everything that we're doing. And since this policy, every other policy document, including Better Births in England and Best Start in Scotland, are based on these principles. They're not easy to achieve because we've got a large factory system, an NHS, which is actually one of the most effective and efficient in the world, looking after a lot of people. So moving to this truly personalised care by continuity of carer is quite difficult to achieve. But I would argue with you, it's essential and worth it. So I would say that we can't stop where we are. We can't wait for a moment until our problems are sorted out. We actually need to change to sort out the problems that we've got at the moment. We need to choose to go forward. And actually, in fundamental change or transformative change, you transcend the problems, you overcome them. And continuity of care is not all that we have to implement, but it is a mainstay. We've got the evidence, we know what works, we know that with properly set up midwifery continuity of carer, there is a lower risk of burnout for midwives and potential for deep satisfaction. Not all midwives have to provide continuity of carer to make sure that every woman has continuity of carer by default. And midwives want to move into it and out of it over their lives, or they might not want to do it at all. But probably about 40% of midwives, I don't know if Jo agrees, would need to choose to work in this way. We know that current services aren't sustainable, and we know now that there is support and there are resources. And NHS England, with its detailed documents and its planning tools and its building blocks, are an absolute godsend to anybody planning and setting up continuity of care. So to add, or perhaps to bring together Jo's 10 top tips, I would say that what is absolutely critical is leadership. And Jo, just using you as an example, and I know that there are other directors of midwifery, heads of midwifery, regional chief midwives who are doing similar work. What you show is leadership. You show the vulnerability and that you need support. But I would say that if I had you as a pilot on my plane doing the takeoff announcement, I would feel very, very confident in you. And I think in a way your vulnerability, your wanting to ask people to support you, to consult and to engage with others is really critical to that leadership. We need a vision, a clear vision. And yes, we can say this is challenging, it is difficult, but it's important, it matters, we need to do it. And I'm with you all the way. The planning is absolutely critical. As a director of midwifery in my last director of midwifery job at Guy's and St Thomas's, we had somebody actually leading on the development of midwifery continuity of care, because I, as a head of midwifery, director of midwifery there, felt that I couldn't do it. It wouldn't leave me enough time to look at the rest of the service. So sometimes the director of midwifery, head of midwifery needs assistance. We need to start with community-based practices, and we need the support and resources that we've got from NHS England. And I have to mention too, the other 3 countries of the United Kingdom are all developing continuity of care. So all I'm going to say now, Sue and Jo, is that I think Jo has given a highly credible how-to, and I'm sure that she would be willing to help others who are feeling nervous about making this journey. Making midwifery continuity of care the default really matters and will make a difference. Planning the route, knowing where we're going, knowing how we're going to get there, believing and committing to change are really important. I'm not going to go through the 10 top tips, but what I would like to say to all of the midwives and other birth workers and others listening is, yes, this is a challenge. It's part of a much bigger program of transformation, fundamental change, what I would call humanizing childbirth. Humanizing childbirth is recognizing that birth is a time of transformation for the baby being born, for the woman becoming father, for the woman becoming mother, and for the partner becoming parent, and for the family being formed. And they will make a huge difference to our future. And midwives working with women will have the opportunity of truly working with women, talking with them about the kind of experience they want, what's important to them, and ensuring that they get the care that's appropriate for them, and making sure that's available for all women in our service, so that we know that at that time of birth, which will affect them and their baby for the whole life, but future generations as well, and our whole world and society, I would say to you that it's worth it. Jo, I'm ready to take off, and I'm very, very willing to take off with you and everybody who's with us. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think that it's been fantastic. And I'm just thinking, well, perhaps I need to come round and serve the coffee to keep our pilots going. That was really fabulous. And thank you so much, because I know there's a whole load of questions lurking now. And I'm looking this way, and I need to remind the audience that I'm looking over here, because that's all your questions come up on my other screen, so I can keep track of things. So thank you to Lesley and thank you to Jo for giving us a lot of food for thought. And it for me, it's quite interesting because it's some of what Lesley was talking about was almost historical, but it's not, because it's coming through in spirals, not even circles, but spirals. So, and it's kind of different now and very exciting. But I think Jo has shown such fantastic leadership. How fabulous. And there are some questions here coming, so I hope you can answer some of them. Now we've got firstly Celine LeMay. Hi Celine, who says, Joanne, so she's asking you, Joanne, what do you consider the difference, if there is one, between continuity of care and continuity of carer? Are they the same? Good question, Celine.
I think it's a brilliant question, and I think it's a question that we've heard many times as we started to move through the journey. So labour ward midwives will say, well, the midwife didn't know the lady when she came in, or etc., and that will improve as we move through the journey. But I think what I'm absolutely passionate about around continuity care, it's about the relationship, the belonging, the feeling that you're part of that team. So we will see women that will come in and they will say, I'm part of Infinity Concert. And in that sentence, they feel that belonging. They'll be looking after, a midwife will be looking after them and say, Leslie's coming to look after you next, or Sue's coming to look after you next. And Sue, she's part of our team. And that in itself gives that sense of belonging. Ideally, obviously, what we want to do is and I think it will improve as we move through into the different stages of our recovery or the next phase of COVID, when we can start to bring our women back into the fold, essentially, into family centres and things for antenatal support and education and coming together. But certainly what we find is in the Infinity teams is there is a huge amount of conversation about women and their families. So it might be that we're looking after Mandy, and Mandy is on her second marriage, and we know she's got 3 children already, and she's got a dog called Charlie. And actually that whole ability to say, who's looking after Charlie while you're here and things like that, it creates that sort of sense of well-being. I know it all sounds very, very fluffy. The hard thing about going into a delivery suite or going into labour or heading into the early stages of birth, as so many people on this call will know, is that it's that telling your story again from the very beginning. That's such an important personal time of your life. So the thought that when you go home tomorrow, or when the midwife comes to see if you've had a home birth, whatever the situation, that actually they know what's happened in labour, and we were there, and we can experience that as a team with you. So I think I would say that the question being continuity care, continuity carer, I think it's both. So I think it's about everyone coming together to kind of love each other in the teams, or whether it be the women in the families we care for, or the team that come together as a sort of a work family. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think it's and I know it sounds fluffy, but it's kindness and compassion.
And family and relationship, which I think you both kind of explored. That's fabulous. Thank you. We've got Nora Vallejo. Hi, Nora, who says, Jo, wondering if you've measured the satisfaction levels of women and midwives to this way of working.
It's a great question, Nora, and it's one that we have been asked. So I think it's a bit like you can ask a midwife one day and then ask her another day. I think it's been really hard through COVID because we have had such huge gaps in staffing during COVID, and that's been it really fluctuates. And can affect how midwives are feeling in the new model. I think overall, when you speak to midwives in a team that's delivering continuity in the purpose that it was, and that's why in one of the top tips I said that actually it's so important to deliver the team against the model it was designed for. So I remember on the 7th of January when we had Omicron, and I actually said to our director of nursing I'm so tempted to pull this or pause this during the next few weeks, because it almost felt like the team was being abused, or the teams have been abused, and actually it wasn't. It was creating more stress and burnout for those staff, because it wasn't delivering continuity of care. It was creating escalation. So I think in the essence of true continuity, when it works and we've got a full team, the midwives are, they tell me some most wonderful things. I was in delivery suite last week and a midwife came in her jacket and just said, "Hi, how's things doing? I'm here tomorrow, and who's here?" And just wonderful to see that. From a woman's point of view, again, it's all very qualitative at the moment, the thank you cards and the responses and things, but we are starting some quantitative work using a sort of an app that's going to measure our culture, our morale, and our sort of our feedback from our staff and our women going forward over the next few months. So as we move through transformation, what we aim to do is monitor the feedback from a morale and a staff satisfaction over phase 3, and we're just heading off on that journey now. So it's qualitative rather than quantitative at the moment.
Well, it sounds like a good research project for someone in that locality, and I suspect someone's thinking about it. Fabulous, thank you. We've had lots of compliments. Catherine Frayne, hi Catherine, says, "Love listening to you, Lesley, such an inspiration." And then Nora Vallejo also says, "Dynamic and inspiring. Thank you, really needed to hear this." Oh, that's very positive. And Gillian Morrow says, "Thank you, Lesley and Joe, getting ready to take off in Northern Ireland, and so grateful for support from my midwifery family and other leaders," which is, so this is very good, because this is all about connection. So Gillian, you might want to get in contact with Joe and Lesley, or and link up with people. And Georgia, "That was so inspiring, Lesley. I'm a student midwife in my 2nd year." Thank you for that. So
thank you.
There's lots and lots of questions. We've got Lucy is saying, "How do you roster continuity of care to cover birth availability, as well as ensuring a relationship is built with all 8 midwives in a team?" I thought it wasn't. Is it as many as 8, Joe?
It is, yeah. It's a head count of 8, yeah. So it's a head count of 8 and a whole time equivalent of, I think, 6.48 within the team. Yeah. So the birth availability in our teams, and I know we've got Amy in the background somewhere we could also link in with Lucy. But our midwives, if we take it as a whole time equivalent, would provide 1 acute cover, which is the daytime cover. And that doesn't mean that they're on the unit standing waiting for somebody to come in. They start on the unit, they help make sure our ship is safe in the morning by doing the checks and seeing what's happening and seeing if they've got anybody on the postnatal antenatal ward to support with a discharge. And if they haven't and all of that's done and the ship is safe, they go back out and support their women antenatally and postnatally, unless they've got any elective work or their women, anybody from their team is in labour. On a night time, they are for birth or acute availability on call. So they don't start at the unit. They are available to attend the unit if they've got any acute women in labour. And that tends to be birth availability during the day 1 week and an on-call the next week. But we've got lots of examples of rosters if people would like to look at them. And I'm sure Amy and myself would be able to support that.
Sue, I put a reference in your reference list to NHS England, because the guidance is really detailed and will give advice on this. So Fantastic. It's easy to get hold of and it's worth reading.
And thank you for reminding me, Lesley, because I should have said at the outset, there are plenty of references on that list which are really good. And the Better Birth website, transformation website, is really useful. Also, I think people would be interested in the rosters because there's a lot of very practical questions coming through at the moment. For example, one of them was, where is it? Wanting about your current vacancies, but which you've talked about actually. So that would be, and Bethan Watson wants to know, will the newly qualified midwives that qualify in September be allocated straight into continuity of care teams?
That's a great question. Yeah, so we started this in November this year. last year, at the end of last year. So our intake that came to join us in November, and we trialled a new preceptorship. The preceptorship is the first few weeks is in the acute unit. Before that, the first 2 weeks is a front-loading skills 2 weeks of being with the practice development team in the skills centre, really developing those hands-on skills that you would do sort of incrementally over a number of weeks. So they 2 weeks really, really full, and that gets really good reviews from our practice development team. And then they go off to work in the acute unit for a couple of weeks. And then they start to work within the continuity of carer teams. But what they do on their birth availability day, they are on site, they are providing acute care, regardless of whether they've got somebody in labour from their team or not, because it's about that upskilling from and gain that confidence and competence in that acute care. They have their preceptorship journal, they have their preceptorship skill achievement elements to achieve. And what we've found is a few things, just a very, very short sentence, is that the feedback so far from our, particularly 2 of our newly qualified midwives, is that they feel ahead of the game. They've always done this throughout their training, is work in different areas. And what they're finding is they're getting a really rounded confidence and competence in each area at the same time, rather than being sort of pigeonholed into maybe postnatal or labour ward for 6 months. So they're getting that really rounded experience and managing to address their preceptorship needs as they go. And also, because they're in a small team, they're getting lots of support from a really tight group of midwives to support them, rather than not knowing who they're going to be on shift with tomorrow. So working well so far, but we are monitoring it very closely.
And I think what you were saying about the midwife coming on, what I was picking up from there is someone's coming into work excited about coming into work tomorrow, instead of feeling exhausted. Oh, I don't want to work anymore. It feels much more positive, and it's that sort of relationship with your team and with your women and families, which has come over really strongly, and open that.
And I think it is a challenge though, and I think that what, as part of our operational weekly meeting, we're developing a communication sort of SOP and a communication element to that meeting that are looking at any risks or any elements that we maybe can build on or learn from in the previous week. But also what we found was, as we started to move forward, we would have comments like, well, the Infinity midwife was on a laptop and we were really, really busy. And it's kind of like those sort of things are sort of teasing out what works well, what doesn't work well. And sometimes it's just kind of not holding the mirror up and knowing how you come across and things like that. So it doesn't always work well, but actually some of the things we're starting to see is lovely. That day in the staff room, there were 3 Infinity midwives and they were buzzing. It was lovely.
Yeah, it's really positive. I'm just going to say it now. I've got a comment, because I could listen to you forever, but I know, and we've got lots of questions here, which we'll try and answer online afterwards, because there's an awful lot. But we've got a comment from Joe Deguston. Hi, Joe, who says, thank you so much to Joe and Lesley. We're so pleased at AIMS that this call for transformation is being taken so seriously by key leaders in the midwifery profession, and indeed the whole multidisciplinary team. Keep going. We'll do whatever we can to support you. And how lovely is that?
And
really?
if I could say,
yes, you can. I was going to say
that Joe and AIMS have been so important to our development and supporting the moving forward of continuity of carer. It's very much our support from charities and from user groups and from Maternity Voices has been absolutely invaluable, wouldn't you say, Joe?
Absolutely. And I think the development as we're moving forward with the development of the MVPs as well, we've just invited 2 MVPs to be involved in our project board. So, really looking forward to them getting involved much more.
Fantastic. I have to bring it to a close. I'm so sad to do so, but please, those of you who are online, we'll try and get to your questions as we can, because we only have a certain amount of time. But thank you so much to our wonderful guests, our Lesley Page and Joe Crawford, who've been absolutely fantastic. I have to say, we must have them back again, mustn't we? Definitely. You don't get out of it. Once you're here and I've got you, you never escape. Now, remember, those resources are there, lots of good references. Some of them are articles, but there are also lots of web links, which are really, really good and interactive and really useful. And just to know, this will be available on Facebook as well. Also, I need to say to you, next week we've got Diane Garland and Geraldine Hotham talking about getting antenatal education online. And it was really during COVID, but maybe on beyond. So that's for next week. We've got the All Ireland Maternity Midwifery Festival next week. We've got a Maternity Midwifery Festival in the Midlands in April on the 26th and in Manchester 21st of June. Put a paper in if you haven't put one in. Register for the event, because you can either come live face to face or get your recording, whichever you'd like to do. And in the meantime, stay safe, stay well. If you're due a booster, get your booster, and we'll see you next Wednesday, 7 to 8. And thank you again to our lovely Lesley and Jo.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The Maternity and Midwifery Forum brings you Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. All your CPD and revalidation needs met in one place. Our expertly curated box sets are the perfect way to engage with the latest thinking, issue by issue. They make revalidation easy and are the perfect accompaniment to any project or university coursework. In addition to video from expert speakers across maternity and midwifery, there is easily accessible research and links to the latest government policy documents. Our reflective questions at the end are the perfect primer for your revalidation. In the same way the Maternity and Midwifery Forum provides certificates to show that you have attended these festivals, we can provide certificates for those who have consumed the content of a box set and submitted their written answers to the reflective questions provided by our curator, Dr. Jenny Hall. Midwives, maternity professionals and students, do not miss out. Subscribe to Matflix today.
Box sets are now available via Open Athens and other international federated access with library institutional subscriptions packages starting from £1,500 a year. Individual subscriptions are also available at £8.99 a month and just £4.99 a month for students.
Check out the box sets at www.matflix.co.uk.
A big day for us at Matflix. We have finally cleared all the hurdles to get onto Open Athens for access in universities, trusts, companies and anybody else that uses those kinds of systems. So if you're at university, if you're a teacher, if you're a student, then you can get Matflix onto your Open Athens system and begin to access everything. We've published over 1,000 maternity and midwifery videos over the past few years, and they've been watched in over 180 countries. But everyone fed back that searching through them and trying to pull them together into presentations was something they would like us to do, and to improve the cataloguing. So we're now launching expert box sets, and we'll be giving access to people through open access to the huge archive of 1,000 of some of the best presentations from maternity experts around the world. The thing about these box sets is that they allow you to find presentations by topic. They include invaluable research indexes and workbooks, and they provide you with video content you can trust. Besides Sue Macdonald's work in curating the original programs and recordings, the box sets have been edited by Jenny Hall, former editor at The Practicing Midwife, and somebody that many educators will know from her time in Bournemouth. It also saves time and money for educators and employers. It's from trusted experts, trusted selections that are manageable size, ideal for training and study, and you can use them, and we found people using them to rehearse for applying for jobs. And good for reflective learning. And we already have a whole string of box sets out, and we'll be releasing a new one almost every week through the rest of this year. So the new institutional subscriptions for universities and trusts are on Open Athens now. There's 3 levels of subscription, one just for students, one for students and staff who want to use it in teaching, want to use clips, and also want to point students towards it for the flipped classroom. And there's also institution-wide subscriptions, so not just for maternity and midwifery students, but for all those medical students, social science students, people doing women's studies, for whom what's happening in maternity and midwifery is really important. So this is a big step up for Matflix. It's a big new service. It helps fund the Maternity and Midwifery Hour and the festivals and keep those bits free. So I hope you'll look into it, and I hope you can champion it with your institutions. And again, a big thanks to Sue Macdonald and to Jenny Hall for all their curating and editorial work.